We're very honored to have Dr. Renee Wegryzn, who is currently the Vice President of Business Development at Gingko BioWorks.
The perspective that I bring here is really, we're ushering in the century of engineered biology, whether it's through gene editing or it's through engineering of living medicines that will be in our gut or in soil to promote, fertilization and growth, especially as we face challenges like climate change. And so if we are ushering in that century of engineered biology, these frameworks are going to quickly become obsolete if we also aren't creating the definitions and the governance around these emergent capabilities and their potential for dual use. The folks here on the Zoom call, I think, have deep expertise in this area, but not everybody does. Not everybody knows what to look out for. And so really making sure that any guidance that we put forward is pressure tested and done so in a really regular basis, because I think we may surprise ourselves, things that maybe that we just haven't even imagined that engineered biology is going to bring forward that will cause dual use research challenges. In many cases, I think that the technology itself and the advances in engineered biology can be leveraged to actually reduce risk and provide an analysis, do the analysis of alternatives and use the technology itself. I think it's easy to think about an experiment that could be a gain of function, for example, and say it's going to be really hard to recreate that without actually doing that experiment. But I would challenge that statement. And I think if we look at what those gain of function experiments are intended to do, what questions are they meant to answer about the physiology and pathogenicity of the bug, about things like receptor binding, immune escape, emergent antiviral resistance, transmissibility. I would argue that where we're going now in industry with foundry, high throughput, automated workflows, that many of these questions can be answered using the tools of synthetic biology and engineered biology. And just for example, even here at Gingko, where I sit, we can run more than 1 million strain tests per day. And you can imagine as you see a new spike variant come up, let's say in the case of SARS-CoV-2, is that something that we need to be worried about? During my time at DARPA, there was a program that I was developing called Sept, and the premise of that program was to enable gene editing technologies, but to do so in a way where they are they're safer, they have less off-target effects, we're able to develop countermeasures against them and even reverse their effects. And when putting forward the funding announcement, what was clear is that there were not regulations that were in place that you could clearly point at, besides just standard BSL guidance and institutional review. There's a real opportunity here, I think, on the heels of a pandemic, where we created an infrastructure and brought together so many labs and capabilities. Even wastewater testing now is becoming more and more standard. Sustaining this type of surveillance that actually can be in place to provide early warning is going to be very important to maintain in between panic and neglect cycles that are typical for pandemics and funding, candidly. I think just one example of why you would want to have this in place, passive monitoring, things like air monitoring and wastewater. If you look at Omicron, when that popped up and was called a variant of concern in Thanksgiving weekend last year, it was 4 weeks until more than 90% of the U.S. population had the strains that were measured were Omicron. So 4 weeks to sort of overtake and outcompete something that was already there. It's a phenomenal timeline. If you don't already have that surveillance system in place for early warning, forget it. You're not going to be able to pick those up. But then how do we layer into this surveillance system things like to look for some engineered sequences that could be indicative of catching early something like an accidental release or even a purposeful release of an engineered threat? We don't have that yet. And that capability is not going to happen overnight. We're going to need to have care and feeding of these technologies to build this muscle and provide those technologies. One great example that I'll just share is IARPA has a program called Felix that really was meant to go well beyond a list-based method to look at sequences and say, hey, is this engineered? And how can we start to analyze and understand what the sequence does? What's the intent of this sequence?